Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Think Tank. Social Security, what is it, and what could be done about the problems associated with it for Americans? Now originally Social Security was a system where people pay into with taxes, and then when they retire, they get money back. The problem is, there's no trust fund. The money is spent. So now the money has to come in from people that are paying into currently with taxes. And that money is being given to senior citizens. The problem is that there's not going to be enough money for people that are paying into now by the time they retire. I mean, it's an insolvent system. According to the U.S. Census, by 2050, senior citizens are a demographic that are going to increase by 104%. So there just won't be enough money for people that are paying into it now. And here's something else you have to understand. See, the government, they love to make predictions about the economy. Oh, there's boom and bust cycles. The Keynesians love this. Here's the problem. If you look back at 2008, after the housing crisis, the economy hasn't recovered. You see, they say the unemployment is around 8-something%. And even according to them, the economy is not growing. We don't have any sustainable growth. And the truth is, if you look at the true numbers, the economy is around 15-20% unemployed. I mean, that's a disaster. That's a true recession that we're in right now. So the thing is, I don't think the economy is going to recover based on the way things are structured right now. Unless the government changes the way they do things with regulations. I mean, there's no way that the economy can recover. So their projections are wrong. And there is not going to be enough money coming into the system because the economy is not there, the jobs aren't there. So how is money going to be paid into the system? You're going to have more people going on the dole. And speaking of that, my point here is, why do they even call it Social Security? I mean, to me it just looks like welfare, but it's even worse than welfare. And I'm going to explain why. I mean, if you look at the system, I mean, it's such a pet peeve that I have with it because, I mean, you have these young kids, these poor young kids. They barely have their head above water. They're drowning in debt, all right? And they have to pay off all these loans. They're graduating with worthless degrees. And if they can find a job, they have to pay into the system that's subsidizing these out-the-cockers. These out-the-cockers. These old people, right, living in Palm Beach. They have their country clubs, their golf courses. I mean, many of these people, they're millionaires. Some of them are billionaires, all right? And they're collecting Social Security. They're collecting Social Security on the backs of these poor young kids. I mean, is something wrong here? Am I I mean, is it only me? I mean, I see something very wrong about this system. Now, what's interesting is, I'm not for welfare. I think welfare should be abolished. I think it could be replaced. I think charity is a way to replace it. I mean, I'm against welfare. But if you really look at it, it's just like welfare, but worse. And here's why. Because with welfare, at least there's some sort of a system, there's an accountability to it. I mean, if you're making more money than the poverty line, you're not eligible for welfare. So at least certain people don't get it, and some people do it. But with Social Security, everyone gets it. It doesn't matter how poor you are, how rich you are. You could be a billionaire and collect Social Security. It's so heartless. That's my question. Why are liberals so heartless? How could they constantly promote this? I mean, I just don't understand. These poor young kids that just can't manage, and there's no jobs for them. Drowning in debt, that's also because of government guaranteed loans. It's just so terrible. I feel sorry for people like that. Especially people that can't find work. Or if they can find some kind of work, they still have to pay into this. Now, I'm not for welfare, but at least call it welfare. And if they did call it welfare, there can be an accountability to it. At least they can do that, because if Social Security was just included in welfare, then they can decide who gets it. Billionaires should not be collecting Social Security on the backs of young kids. So if people are making a certain amount, if they're like below the poverty line as senior citizens, yeah, they get the checks according to the welfare system. But if people are millionaires and billionaires collecting Social Security, or even people that have the means, should not be collecting Social Security. Because, there's no way to pay for it. These kids can't pay for it, and they're not going to see it. It's not fair to them. Now, you can say, hey, you know, they paid into it. Even the rich people paid into it, and they have a right to collect it now. But hey, no, they don't. Because according to that view, then people paid into a lot of things that the government wasted, right? What about all these wars that cost over $1 trillion, right? Everyone paid into that. Is there any benefit to it? What about all the money that's been wasted by government, right? All the money that's been wasted in the Department of Education, FEMA, Cash for Clunkers, all these crazy, goofy investments that the government invests in that are going bust. What about all the loss of taxpayer money there? It's the government that wasted the money. So whether you invested in Social Security and pay taxes there, or you invested in the wars, I mean, what about these drug wars that have been a disaster? What about all the money wasted there? So if people say, hey, I paid into the system, I have a right to it. Well, what about everybody else that paid into all the other systems that the government ran amok? So it's the same thing. I mean, that's just the way it is. You know, people lost a lot of money in a lot of ventures that the government was in. And everybody ends up suffering because of the bad investments. And this just proves it again. Where government gets involved in things, the system is just extremely poorly run. And it's inefficient. You know, millionaires and billionaires collecting checks from these kids that are broke and drowning in debt. I mean, this is what happens. If this was the private sector, this would never happen. There would be an accountability. You know, when people run a business, when you run a business, you look at cost-cutting measures. You look at things that are draining the company, that are causing the company to go in debt. You use cost-cutting measures, whatever they may be. And what happens is you increase the efficiency of the company. That's what you do. You increase the profits and you liquidate debt. If something is hurting the company, you try to help it by cost-cutting measures. So if you're losing money in one way, you let go of the situation that's causing the company to lose money and you restructure. That's what happens, and that's how a company continues to grow and continues to prosper. But with government, it's not like that. See, they don't do that. I mean, at least with welfare, they're doing something, but with this, I mean, it's a welfare system where extremely poor people are supporting very rich people. I mean, does that make any sense? All right? And here's something really interesting, too. It's really, really fascinating, and this is why democracy is killing this country. Because I remember I was watching the Republican debates, and one of the candidates, his name was Rick Perry, he said, and this is a public forum, this is a national debate, a lot of people are watching, he called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. And when he did that, I mean, I remember at the time, I think he was leading in the polls, his poll numbers dropped. I mean, it just makes you wonder. You see, that's what it is. There are so many people that want this system, and of course it's the people that are collecting checks and people that are approaching retirement. You know, when they hear something like that, they're afraid that they're not going to get their money. So what happens? You know, they're not going to support that person. And this is what happens with politics. Politicians promise people what they want to hear so they can get their vote. And this is the problem with democracy. But it just goes to show why a lot of people won't touch this. And I remember a lot of libertarians, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think they came out in a public forum like that and actually said that, because they knew probably it's not good for votes. So he actually said that, and look what happens. You see, that's the problem here. So, you know, overall, the system, they have to at least include it in welfare. And like I said, welfare itself is, of course, is a huge problem. You know, I'm against welfare. There's a lot of other things that can help poor people. But this system needs to be overhauled, and then they have to look at welfare in totality and work on that as well. But Social Security is basically a worse kind of welfare. That's really what it is. I mean, I don't even know why they call it Social Security. Maybe it just sounds better. Social Security, like you'll be secure, the government will take care of you. But as we can see, that's not possible for these young kids that are paying into it, and it's heartless for these young kids. So that is the perspective of the think tank. I would like to know your perspective. Please leave your comments, and thank you for tuning in.